And there we go. That was our moment of silence for Prince.
Rest in peace, Prince.
All right, what's up, guys? Welcome back to RetroActive, where every day is a Throwback Thursday.
Hashtag Throwback Thursdays.
I am one of your hosts. I am one half of RetroActive. I'm Joey.
And I am the other half of RetroActive. I am Will.
All right, so this week we're gonna go a little bit off course. Okay, not off course. We're gonna introduce a new segment to the podcast.
Holy Jesus. What is that? What the fuck is that?
That is one big pile of shit.
This is gonna be bad.
You will never find the more wretched hive of scum and villainy. We must be cautious.
This segment is called Wretched Reboots.
Wretched Reboots. With a W.
We're calling it Wretched Reboots because, as we know, Hollywood has been going absolutely bonkers with remaking everything, especially in this last decade.
Yeah, and I mean, we also want to not just talk about like reboots. We also mean that in all these upcoming sequels to like 80s and 90s movies that didn't really need sequels, and of course like remakes, reimaginings, any of that stuff that Hollywood is insistent on churning out these days. So there's a lot of them, and we're going to talk about maybe not all of them, but
we're going to talk about
a lot of them.
We're going to talk about two of them today.
Yeah, at least two.
So we're going to kick off the very first episode of Retro Reboots within this episode of RetroActive with Jumanji.
Jumanji.
Okay, so in the news we got this past week, we got word of a Jumanji remake. Mm-hmm. And what they're doing is they're calling it a reimagining, quote unquote.
Yeah, with the quotes
of the original movie, not necessarily a remake. I guess because the term remake is kind of toxic nowadays.
Yeah, like you're trying to do it again, but do it better somehow.
Yeah, okay, like reimagining is any better?
No, it's really
is
not.
Any better word to use? But come on, we know it's a remake. We know it's going to be about the board game. It's going to be about jungle animals. At least we think we do.
Yeah, we think so, because if you think about it, that's the original idea of Jumanji,
yeah,
right?
But reimagining, it could be anything. So let's start off with what we do know.
Okay, what do we know about this movie so far,
We
Joey?
know that it will be starring Dwayne Johnson.
The Rock.
Dwayne The Rock Johnson.
The Rock. If you smell.
So he confirmed a couple days ago on Instagram that he and his production company will be making the movie.
He has a production company?
Yeah.
Oh.
I'm not sure what they make. Maybe this is their first movie, for all I know.
Oh, good Lord. All right.
And there's a couple things that I got worried about after reading his post. And the words that he used to talk about it, he says that he's working on, I quote, edging up the script.
Edging up the script?
Yeah.
Like he's what? He wants to make it all like edgy and hip and cool for today's youth.
I honestly have no idea what he means by that.
Yeah.
But I mean, we know what people think about when they think about edginess in movies, trying to make it really, really cool for whatever standards they're thinking about. And that kind of breaks my heart when you're talking about doing that to Jumanji.
Yeah, honestly, that seems really unnecessary for a movie like Jumanji. I mean, it's like, I don't know. I feel like Jumanji still by itself was already like a solid kind of movie.
It definitely is. It doesn't. I feel like it doesn't need edge to it just because of like the emotional core in the movie itself. If they want to bring whatever edge is to this movie, it might kind of destroy that core.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I could see it going kind of either way with that, like edging it, maybe like, as in they want to. I don't know, maybe like portray the dangers of it a little bit better, like maybe make you really feel like this is like really dangerous stuff. Because I mean, the original Jumanji did a pretty good job of that considering when it was made in like, what is
96.
it, 96? Yeah, that's over 20 years old. And graphics and CGI and visual effects have come so far since then. Well,
I know, but that's exactly what I feel will kind of take away from the story aspect of it. Mm-hmm. Like what I assume that they'll probably add is a lot more explosions, a lot more use of technology in the movie, a lot of... I feel like they would add a lot of just kind of brainless dialogue. And
so they're going to Michael Bay this movie.
Exactly, that's what I think. Because, okay, what was one of the last movies that that Dwayne Johnson worked on. It was Pain and Gain.
Pain and Gain.
Which was like the bodybuilding movie that he made with Michael Bay.
Yeah, right.
That movie itself, it's a hilarious movie. But if that's the kind of edge that he's thinking about,
yeah, I feel like I just want to call him The Rock.
Just call him The Rock.
Yeah, I feel like with The Rock, like if you look at a lot of the movies he's done over time, since he left WWE to make movies mainly, it's like he's either done really like crappy comedies that put him in that comedic role, like where he's kind of the butt of the jokes, or he's in a lot of like crappy action oriented movies where either he's kind of like where he's kind of like either the main actiony dude, like he's just there
definitely
for the muscle and everything,
You notice that he's made a lot of like adventure fantasy movies, right?
Yeah,
like Journey to the Center of the Earth.
Escape
from something mountain.
I Escape from Witch Mountain.
Witch Mountain. Yeah, there we go. Yeah, he's done a bunch of those, and this is I feel like is going to be no different from all those kind of crappy ones.
Yeah, because you look at Jumanji as being one of those movies that could easily fit into that mold that he already does, which is not a good thing. I feel like.
Yeah, like if you look at Rotten Tomatoes, I don't think there's a single movie there that he's starred in, like been the one like headline in it that has been over 70%.
Yeah, which is not a good track record. And I feel like there's already a lot of things behind this movie too that leave me a little worried for it too. Like, and we'll talk about that in a little more in depth, like too, in terms of like the casting and who they have to direct this movie, because that's what I looked at and I was like, oh man, I have no idea why they want to tackle this project. But yeah, let's talk about that a little bit. Just the casting itself. Like, so Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, he's not only like producing it with his company, but he's going to be the star in this.
He's going to be the main character.
Yeah.
Presumably.
Which is, we're going to presume that he's going to be kind of the Robin Williams role, maybe. Which
that hurts.
Yeah, your face looks, is full of pain right now.
All right, so, we know that. And we also know that the other person who's not confirmed but is in talks to be co-starring with Dwayne Johnson is Kevin Hart. The hilarious duo of a hunky, no-nonsense straight man and a loud, fast-talking comic relief man.
Yeah.
Basically, the two main characters of any buddy comedy in the last 40 years.
That's what it sounds like already with just that cast. If you were to just look at the two of them, put them side by side, what kind of movie would you think it is?
Yeah, it's why are they not like cops?
Yeah, exactly.
I think they were in their last movie.
Yeah.
But it's a really strange casting to cast two main characters who were just known for doing like a buddy cop comedy into this adventure kids remake.
Yeah.
What? Why would you turn it into that?
I don't know. And it's like, you feel like too, it's like it's going to be drastically different already from the original, because based on what these two have done also, they've done mostly like comedy,
Yeah.
And Jumanji, I feel like, was not necessarily always it wasn't really about the comedy.
Yeah,
like,
you had Robin Williams, but he wasn't really like, he wasn't being the traditional Robin Williams comedic type.
Yeah, exactly. Actually, if you look at the story behind his character, it's pretty sad.
It is.
He gets sucked into a board game as a kid, and he is stuck in the jungle there for like 30 something years, fending off like predators and wild animals and the hunter guy and everything. And it's like
all he wants to do is get back to his family.
Yeah, and you look at what happens when he does get back to like reality, to the real world and everything. It's like time has moved on without him. Everybody thought he was dead.
Yeah.
And it's like about him also readjusting to life in the present. And
my God,
you can go pretty deep with that, but you look at having Dwayne Johnson, Kevin Hart in a movie like that, it just is not.
I don't see like an emotional core with them two being there.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you why. Like having two protagonists be those two people, especially, it kind of puts the primary focus on them as the comedy,
right?
Or no, okay, how do I say that? It just puts the primary focus on them instead of like the board game or the story around it.
Right. It takes away from the concept of the movie, which is supposed to be about the game.
Which is even if they include it at all.
Yeah.
Because reimagining and crap, whatever.
Yeah. I mean, to me, it almost kind of feels like the way that we talked a lot about Ghostbusters before, about how the idea of like catching ghosts and everything becomes, it kind of becomes secondary to the actual like stars of the film. And it basically becomes like the butt of the joke. And I feel like that might be what Jumanji could become in that case, where like the game itself is almost just the butt of a joke. It's like, oh, there's all these animals coming out of the board game. Oh gosh, what's gonna happen now?
It's gonna be a lot of comedy centered around them reacting to stuff that happens.
Yeah.
Ah.
Just take a moment and think about that.
Okay, I have thought about it, and I can imagine kind of exactly what the plot is going to be like.
All right.
So Dwayne Johnson and Kevin Hart, they go on a safari. It's no longer about the board game, but they go on a safari and they stumble across like some kind of portal in the jungle that transports them to like an alternate dimension where animals can talk or can somehow communicate with humans and are highly evolved, and they have to figure out ways to escape. And for some reason, one of their nieces or nephews like tags along with them. So
right.
they have to,
you have to have the kids still.
Yeah, they have to take care of them, and they stuck along for the trip, and now they have to deal with it.
Damn.
Yeah, I don't know, but I wouldn't be surprised if the plot was anywhere near that.
Yeah.
Like if they didn't include the board game at all.
Spoiler alert. No, it's not really.
But yeah, anyway, the point that I'm trying to make is that when you cast 2 leading actors in a movie that's supposed to be centered around like this mysterious board game, the board game is no longer the main character.
Yeah.
Like for example, if you look at the original Jumanji's kind of spiritual successor,
Zathura?
You know about that one, right?
Oh yeah, yeah.
And
actually, that was actually a really good movie.
Yeah,
too.
and I was really surprised because in Zathura they do a really, really good job at making the board game and kind of all the events that happen because of it, like the focal point of the movie.
Mm-hmm.
Like I mean, the entire movie takes place like in the house. They never leave it.
Yeah.
But stuff happens,
Outside,
directly to it, and it's all really, really like laser focused just or what happens to them in the house.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of room for just like wasted, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it's also like not also about like so much because the kids are relatively like unknown kids anyway. It's like doesn't really matter. They just have to like act through it and just act surprised when they need to be. Mm-hmm. And I think there's like the astronaut. There's only like one astronaut dude. There's like Sam Rockwell or something.
Dax Shepard.
Discount
Sam Rockwell.
Yeah, there you go. Dax Shepard. And it's like I mean even he does a pretty good job of like kind of carrying it when he needs to. But it's not like he's not some like fancy handsome leading man kind of actor.
He doesn't do a lot to try and make you laugh.
Yeah.
Like you put someone like Kevin Hart, that's his
forte.
purpose.
Yeah. Exactly. Same with The Rock. I mean, he's basically there to like, stand in front of the camera and to like draw
hunky.
you to it. Yeah. To draw your eyes there and less to like what's around him. And that's a problem, I think, for a movie like Jumanji, because that's not what it needs, and that's not what it was about.
Yeah, it was about the danger.
Yeah,
it was about the story.
Yeah,
come on,
the story of it.
Okay, another thing that we kind of know is that when you're remaking a movie like this, having a good director is very important.
Definitely, and
hopefully when you remake a movie like Jumanji, you want to have someone who can kind of handle action adventure really well. Like for Zathura, they got Jon Favreau.
Yeah, who also did Iron Man and stuff.
As we know, 3 years later, he did Iron Man.
Yeah,
and he's he just did the Jungle Book, so he's maybe not at the time, but he's turned into this person who can really handle a action adventure set really well.
Yeah.
Luckily for Jumanji, they got Jake Kasdan. Who is the director of
Wait, let's go over all of what has he done? So
he's directed Bad Teacher,
Orange County,
Dewey Cox.
Oh yeah, Walk Hard, Sex Tape,
and a lot of TV.
Yeah,
a lot of TV sitcoms.
So apparently he actually worked with Judd Apatow as a director of Freaks and Geeks.
Yeah,
which that was pretty cool. But if you look at this guy's track record, he's mostly made a bunch of like mediocre to crappy comedy movies.
One thing that we know is that he's a comedy director. He's not someone who does action.
Exactly.
Well. Like what? Why?
It was really funny too when I was looking up who this guy was, because I didn't know who he was at first, but I was like, why does that name sound familiar? So he's apparently the son of Lawrence Kasdan, who is actually who has worked on some really great movies, who's worked on really great action movies. So Lawrence Kasdan, his dad, actually wrote a bunch of the Star Wars movies. He wrote Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi and The Force Awakens. So he's the writer on all those movies. He wrote Raiders of the Lost Ark, and he wrote and directed what is that movie from the 70s, The Big Chill, and actually one other movie that I really liked, an adaptation of Stephen King's Dreamcatcher, which I actually love.
Oh
that
yeah, I
movie.
remember that movie.
Yeah. So
holy crap! Yeah, this guy has a lot.
And actually, what I looked up too, so Lawrence Kasdan is also writing the Han Solo movie that's going to come out for Star Wars, and he's co-writing it with his son Jake.
No.
Yeah, so he's got a lot to live up to as a director, and I feel like up until this point, he just has not.
He's not really proven it.
Yeah, he's not done that. You know, all of his movies so far have been very poorly received and very
I think
mediocre.
maybe Dewey Cox and Bad Teacher were somewhat okay, but
not really.
I would like to know why they decided to go with him. Like, why would they handicap themselves by hiring a guy whose greatest action scene to date is probably Justin Timberlake dry humping Cameron Diaz?
Oh yeah, you want action? There you go.
Yeah.
That's some kind of action at least. But
good lord, like just based on his track record of directing comedies, like you can kind of tell how it's gonna look. Like I can imagine just a lot of the camera angles being very narrow, like suffocating, and they'll probably try to make it really, really epic with all these like helicopter establishing shots that show off the landscapes, but they don't really do anything to really support the movie.
Right.
Like seeing it, just looking at it and seeing how grand like a place is does not really make the movie grand.
No.
You just you have to feel it. And there's one thing that has always annoyed me in like recent 2010 decade comedies is the lighting. And it's
it's hard too because lighting is actually such an art form in itself too when it comes to movies and cinema.
The way that they do it is it's almost always the same.
Yeah.
And especially when they have dialogue scenes, it's going to be basically the same kind of medium shot, reverse shot. There's going to be a lot of like 3-point lighting. Basically what I'm saying is there's not going to be any risks.
Yeah, it's going to be the safest setup possible for shooting this stuff,
because God forbid they confuse the audience with like a certain camera angle or something.
Yeah. And I feel like too, it's like they probably won't take a whole lot of risk with doing stunts or any kind of like, I don't know, with stunts or action-y kind of like set pieces, I mean, there was quite a bit of that in Jumanji too, with like, with the scenes in the house and everything when you had the stampede and everything, they're running from that.
I feel like they will have plenty of stunts. It's just that it will be a lot of green screen work, a lot of CGI, and a lot of it looking pretty terrible.
Yeah, I think so too. I'm really not. I don't know. I feel like we have very low expectations for this already, and I feel like you already too, or just have this pain in your chest when you think about this movie.
All right, so Will.
Yep.
What's your verdict? Is this wretched or is it reasonable?
Well, for me, I would think this is fairly wretched. Fairly wretched. I'm gonna say fairly because it's still very early on in development,
Okay, true.
But for me, based on all the things that we talked about with the casting, with the director, and just with like, what we kind of like know about, what we know about like what's going on with this movie and who's behind it, it just sounds like a recipe for disaster already. Like they're setting themselves up to fail. Because for me, it's hard to imagine like this movie being any good based on like who's in it, who's behind it, and it just sounds like, it sounds like everything else, like when it comes to all these reboots and remakes. It's another attempt to cash in on like a popular like 90s property because, it was a pretty well-beloved movie but for people like our age. I have very fond memories of Jumanji, and I like that movie a lot. Probably not as much as you did and still do and everything, but it was to me, that was a good movie, And, I just can't help but feel like they're going to treat this a lot like the Ghostbusters reboot, where it's like the concept becomes like nothing more than an anchor for all the lame jokes and all the crappy comedy and the subpar action scenes that they're going to put in it, which it's going to be that way,
Yeah.
You just know it.
The one thing that I feel that they're not going to keep in this remake that was so prevalent in the original is kind of the relationship between Robin Williams' character and the kids.
Yeah.
Because, as like the kids, they're like, their parents have died.
Yeah, exactly.
And
They're like living with their aunt or something,
yeah, and
right?
like Robin Williams' character comes into their lives and kind of I'm not gonna say because he doesn't adopt them.
Well, he finds out like what happens to their past and the fact that he winds up going back in time with all his memories intact, really. Because you can think about it almost like a time travel movie.
Yeah.
And he rights those wrongs. He makes sure that their parents don't like go on that trip
there's
that kills
such
them.
like an emotional attachment between like these two groups of characters.
Yeah.
And I cannot for the life of me imagine that happening in this movie with someone like Kevin Hart, especially. Like, how can anyone take him seriously in like a very a movie that deals with like the death of your parents and everything?
Yeah.
Like, how can you do that?
Exactly.
No, it's
I
not
just
gonna
can't
happen.
see it, until he shows us something like that where he can really give us that kind of a performance. I really don't think that that's going to happen in this movie.
Okay, yeah. For me, this movie is going to be 100% wretched.
Certifiably wretched.
It gets a little plaque, or not a plaque, but like a little emblem like next to the.
This is like
the Rotten Tomatoes certified fresh is certified wretched.
So this is the retroactive platinum seal of wretchedness. Wretchedness.
Yeah, for like the current cast, the director, and all the writers attached to the film, it will most likely be like a complete travesty. Like they'll pour upwards of maybe $100 million into this. I can assure you, into making it some kind of big spectacle film, and it will just bomb. I'll predict it right now. They're going to spend $110 million on it. Let's say that, and it will make back 70.
Yeah, it's pretty.
25 to 35 in the first weekend, and then it will just bomb.
Yeah.
But yeah, to give you some perspective as to the people working on this movie, the people currently writing it have written the previous scripts for these movies.
All right.
They've written it for The Amazing Spider-Man 2, which was supposedly the worst Spider-Man movie ever made.
Yeah, I mean, I think the first reboot was okay, but like I heard the second one's really bad.
They wrote Con Air, which is okay, but
that's like a cult movie.
Yeah, but not something like this.
Yeah,
it's a cool one. They wrote Kangaroo Jack.
Never saw it.
I'll tell you what, it's the biggest bait and switch in movie history. And also the upcoming new Transformers movie.
Oh God, yeah.
So there you go.
You already know how we feel about those movies.
Not necessarily a beacon of good storytelling right there, but I mean, take it as you will. Like when this comes out, if it even comes out, I'll just be in the corner clutching my copy, the original copy of Jumanji.
Yeah, yeah. So I think that would be our verdict: is like go watch the original. Because it is a great movie. It's really good, and Robin Williams is great in it. And this movie, bleh, you can probably skip it when it comes out. If it comes out, maybe it won't. Who knows?
Let's hope. All right, moving on. Our second movie.
All right, so the second movie
for this Wretched reboot episode,
we're going to talk a little bit about Ghost in the Shell. Which actually, this movie is pretty much almost done, as far as I know. It's in post-production right now, I believe.
I think they're still filming it.
Are they still filming?
It's going to come out early next year.
Yeah, so it's set to release in 2017. Mostly what I wanted to talk about in this in particular, it's like, so the reason why we're talking about this now rather than when it was announced is like, so there have been images that have come out recently of Scarlett Johansson, who plays the protagonist known as the Major. Full name is Major Motoko Kusanagi.
Oh, it sounds Japanese.
It's very Japanese. Problem is,
Scarlett Johansson is not Japanese.
Exactly. You hit the nail right on the head. So
this is another example of Hollywood whitewashing Asian movies.
Exactly. Right? And Ghost in the Shell, much like Jumanji, is another movie that is like a little over 20 years old now. It came out in 95. Which, seems to be like nowadays, that seems to be the ripe age for reboots or remaking
20
things.
years.
20
years.
So once you hit 20, you're legal to be rebooted, apparently. But yeah, I mean, Ghost in the Shell, it's a very essential like movie for Japanese anime. If you're into Japanese animation, that is an essential movie. You have to see it. It's a really great movie. Much like that other Japanese anime movie, Akira. It just shows you like how powerful those kind of movies could really be and what they can do.
Super like just adult and dark and
a
lot of really, really like deep and heavy themes to them.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, this tackles themes of like, you know, like especially like futuristic themes of
Just technology
and you know how far like we can go, where you know how far you can go. Well, you know, like it talks a lot about themes of technology and that idea of like of embracing humanity in a way, like how much can you still modify yourself to be a machine but still be considered human.
Yeah.
It talked a lot about like, you know, there's a lot of stuff about like gender identity and sexuality in it and everything like that, and it's super deep. There's a lot of really heavy themes that the movie talks about, and just so much to take in with this adaptation of it. And I mean, before we even go on to like the whole whitewashing thing, I mean, I want to talk a little bit about the idea of making a live action adaptation of a Japanese anime.
Okay. Shoot.
You know? I mean, so this isn't even the main problem I have with Ghost in the Shell, but I mean, I really just want to put this out there. Can we stop trying to do live action adaptations of Japanese anime? Because to me, from what I've seen, it rarely ever works out well, even in Japan. Even in Japan, where like that is where anime is from, you know? So you would think that like if anybody can do good adaptations of like anime series, it would be the Japanese film industry. And they still can't get it right. I think the one exception that like springs to my mind is Death Note, which they've done a couple of movies, I think, for that series. And you know, the Death Note was pretty good actually, because it makes for a really decent like live action sort of murder mystery type movie. But even then, there was quite a bit that's like lost in translation to doing live action. And the main problem I feel like I have with doing those kind of movies, and you know, Hollywood does this too. Like Disney is actually kind of like doing that right now with all of their like live action adaptations of their animated movies. And you know, we could save that for another Wretched reboot episode.
Oh, we'll have that on the show.
Yeah, we're definitely going to talk about that at some point. But for me, a lot of the problem I have with doing live action adaptations of these kind of animated films in general, for me, is that animation is its own art form, the same way that like, you know, cinema and live action cinema is, you know?
Okay.
There's like no need to really have both, to be honest. I mean, at least this is my opinion. There's no need to have both, especially when like part of what makes the original so compelling is the animation, you know, or is like the film, like, or is like the cinematography of like, you know, for like live action cinema. I'm like, you know, for example, like, do we need an animated adaptation of say Citizen Kane or Battleship Potemkin? Like, no.
Oh, wait, you didn't let me answer.
Well, it's like, if you want to answer that, do we need an animated adaptation?
If it was like a short film and it was done really well, I would watch one based off of Citizen Kane. That'd be kind of cool because it's black and white. But like, I feel like making a live action version of an animated movie is less controversial, I think.
Yeah, of course.
And mostly because I feel that animation is not always as accessible as live action. I know that kind of sounds weird because,
I mean,
you know,
it's true. I think there are merits to that. Yeah, there are merits to that, I will say, you know. And for me, it's like looking at a movie like Ghost in the Shell. You know, it's one of those movies that I think a lot of people never thought could make it as a live action adaptation, because like the animation is what makes one of the reasons that makes it so good. You know, because the animation is done so well.
But that doesn't mean that you can't. It's a bad idea to translate that into live action, I think. Like, just because the animation is good does not mean that it shouldn't be live action. Like, yeah, you're not going to get all the really nice looking, you know, classic look of the movie, but that's not the point. Like, they're not trying to recapture, or I guess they are trying to recapture like how the movie looks, but okay, go on. I have nothing else.
Well, I mean,
to think
it's
here.
like I can see where you're going with that, and I mean, it's just for me though. It's like animation, like, you know, I have a lot of appreciation for animation, and I know you do too, because you love a lot of like animated films, you know, and because I think a lot of it too is like animation focuses a lot on image, composition of frame, and placement, which sounds a lot like cinema, right?
Yeah,
sounds like what you would do in movies. The thing is that with contemporary Hollywood films, though, that's oftentimes not the case, you know. It's like, I feel like a lot of the times with big Hollywood movies like this one, it's going to be about how close the camera could stay to the actors, how much CGI can you fill the screen with when it pulls away from that, you know? And it's like a lot of times when particularly with comic book movies. Not so much Marvel, but like if you look at smaller ones like Sin City and Watchmen and movies like that, unless you're doing a film like almost like shot for shot like a comic, which can be weird, it's hard to retain that same feel of like animated films, or especially manga, like, in Japanese manga and everything. It's really hard to maintain that feel. And I think that's why a lot of these adaptations do not do so well.
But does that mean you would prefer them kind of go off on tangent, like and make the film something completely different?
I mean,
like, would you be more content with that as opposed to trying to recreate the original as much as possible? Because that doesn't sound like such a bad idea to kind of go off your own, but it might kind of alienate the fans of the original who were like, what are they doing to it, for example?
I mean,
you can't have both.
Exactly. Like I wouldn't want them to make a shot-for-shot remake of it, especially of like live action, I wouldn't want them to do that, because sometimes I think that actually detracts from the movie itself. It's less of a movie and more just like,
oh, how are they going to do this shot next?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, honestly, I would prefer that they just kind of like, if they were to just take it and run with it and make it like different and their own. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in regards to like the casting and the setting and everything too, like when we get down to it, because that's really the big issue that I wanted to talk about with this movie. I mean, the
casting?
Yeah, the casting.
Well, let's talk about the casting.
Yeah, okay, so we'll move on to that. We'll move on to the casting. So what we know about this movie definitely is, so Scarlett Johansson plays the main protagonist. And so if you look at the original story of Ghost in the Shell, it's set in a futuristic Hong Kong. And, with mostly Japanese characters. Like, all the characters are Japanese. Like Bato and all the other, like, the doctors and everything. It's been a little while since I've seen the movie. But, yeah, I mean, most of the characters are all, like, ethnically Asian characters.
Yes.
The problem with the casting, they're all white people.
Not all of them.
The majority of them. I think
the main characters are.
The main characters are, like obviously Scarlett Johansson and
Michael Pitt
and some of the other people. I think they have, the only Japanese guy they have in it, as far as I saw, was Takeshi Kitano. Beat Takeshi.
Who that?
Beat Takeshi.
Beat Takeshi?
That's his like nickname. I think he directed Ichi the Killer. In particular, he's directed several Japanese movies. He was in Battle Royale actually too, as like the teacher. But he's known somewhat as like a cult director here in America. He directs like cult movies and stuff like that usually. But that's really it. You don't have like any other notable Japanese, let alone Asian actors in this movie. And as far as I know, it's still supposed to be set in Hong Kong or Japan or wherever. And these characters are still supposed to be Japanese, or at the very least like Asian.
Yeah.
And obviously, it's easy to say why they made that decision. A person like Scarlett Johansson, like a big like A-list actor, that's going to appeal to a larger crowd.
Definitely.
That's going to appeal to like to draw a bigger box office crowd to the movie, rather than like casting some somewhat well-known like Asian actress or something.
Yeah, like for someone like me who doesn't really know Ghost in the Shell, who comes from a background that isn't steeped in anime and like Japanese culture, I'm kind of the movie's target audience.
Right.
I'm the one that they're trying to get into the theaters because they know, or they assume that they know, that the fans of the movie will go anyway. So they want people like me to go see it, and obviously they want to cast this movie so that they can appeal to a wider audience,
right?
Which makes sense, like from a business standpoint. But to cast a Japanese actress in the movie is great for the fans, but it's terrible for people like me because they don't really they like the general audience does not really have a level of appreciation towards anime that the fans do,
right?
And they don't care if like there's this magnificent like Asian actress, if they're casting, or whether like the story is faithful to the original or anything like that. When people who go see the movie like this will care about two things. They'll care about how cool it looks and who's in it. And if you have one of those covered with Scarlett Johansson, then you're good. Like you'll get a lot more people in going to see that movie than if you had cast someone who was Asian. So, as sad as that is to say, it is true.
And this is also speaking from like, like you're Chinese, I'm half Chinese. So it's like speaking from like the minority standpoint. It's like, I don't know. And that's the thing. It's like, it's not new. It's not something that Hollywood has just started doing recently. It's something that they've always done throughout film history.
Yeah,
pretty
starting
much,
with like,
I
I watched a couple of videos about kind of whitewashing in Hollywood. One of the biggest examples they had of whitewashing was when they were supposedly going to cast like this big Asian actress in one of these movies in the 30s. And she was like one of the only Asian actresses around at the time.
Right.
Her name is Anna May Wong.
Oh yes, she was notable for doing, what is it, Flower Drum Song?
Yeah.
The musical. Yeah.
And so she was gonna play the love interest of the main character, but they ended up casting the Chinese main character with a white man.
Of course.
And at the time in the 30s, they weren't allowed to show interracial marriages or interracial relationships on screen.
Right.
And so they couldn't give Anna May Wong that role.
Right.
And that role went to a German lady instead, who in turn won an Oscar for that role.
Of course.
How?
Yeah, of course. It's like, I mean, that's the thing too. It's like that was in the 30s. That was during like I think that was like during that era when they had that code enacted for films, right? Like this was like during the code era of film where like you couldn't show certain things, like you said.
And that was like one of the earliest examples of like pure whitewashing.
Yeah. And the thing that sucks about it too is it's like, I mean, it's nothing new, yeah, but on the other hand, that does not make it right.
Of course.
It does
not.
Especially it's 2016, and especially in this case, like, all right, where you're making a movie that's like set in like, Hong Kong or Japan with Japanese characters based on a Japanese anime. It's like what I was talking about before about, taking it and just running it and doing your own thing. It's like, well, if you're going to adapt it and you're going to cast a bunch of white actors and have them play these roles, why not just make the whole movie set in like America? Why not just make the whole situation, change the situation to fit the culture that you are making this movie for, and not necessarily like retaining all the Japanese names and identities and then casting a bunch of non-Japanese people in the role. Because honestly, like I think there was one executive that was quoted as saying that they were quote unquote weren't any noteworthy Japanese actresses to play a part of this like magnitude,
which is bullshit.
Yeah, it's an insult, I think, and it just goes to show that like they really only care about like like the money that this would bring in, and everything. And it's like, well, then again, when has Hollywood ever cared about anything else, really? But I think there's one actress in particular who's actually been getting more notoriety in Hollywood recently. And everybody wanted her to play this role, actually, back when the casting was announced, I think back in like August or September of last year. Her name is Rinko Kikuchi. She actually was the first Japanese actress to be nominated for an Academy Award in 50 years for doing that movie Babel in 2006.
Oh, I don't remember.
Yeah, she was also in a couple of other...
She was in Pacific Rim, right?
She was in Pacific Rim, yeah. And she was also the star in, if you've ever seen Norwegian Wood.
Nope.
It was a film adaptation of Haruki Murakami's novel.
I thought you were going to say the song.
No, not the song.
How do you adapt that
Haruki
to a movie?
Murakami's novel. And she was very good in that movie, too. It's like, man, you really like... felt for her in that movie. But yeah, I mean, she's become like, she's become a pretty notable actress, and she could have very easily played that role. She also has the look to play that role.
Yeah.
When you put her side by side with like, a picture of the Major, it's like she looks like she could play that role very easily.
There's been people photoshopping her face onto that photo of Scarlett Johansson, and it looks pretty natural.
Yeah, which is funny considering like, okay, so what's even worse than I think the whole casting choice of having Scarlett Johansson play an Asian character is that they apparently were testing visual effects to make her appear more Asian.
They said that they were testing visual effects on other characters, not on Scarlett Johansson. That's at least what I've heard. That's what they have said. Whether or not that's actually true, we don't know. But still, the fact that they were even testing that on anyone is kind of...
That's a huge insult, I feel like. That's like, what the fuck are you even thinking? Like, stop that shit. Who's in charge of this movie? I want to talk to this person and smack some sense into them.
Can I say something?
Go ahead.
Can I say that... I just want to say, why are we surprised by this?
I mean,
that's a question I have to ask.
It's not the surprise so much. It's that like it's the outrage that it just keeps happening. At least for me on my end.
Well, the thing is that when people started getting outraged at this last week.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing is, like, we knew that she was playing this character back last year in like October and November when they announced that she was going to play the main character in Ghost in the Shell.
And people were still pissed back then. I mean, I think there were like lots of
like I didn't hear anything about it back then, honestly.
Right.
It didn't seem like there was that much of an outcry, and it kind of seems like the ones screaming against it now have a very selective memory.
Oh, of course.
Like either that or they only respond to visuals. Like once they see the picture and like, oh, what's going on?
Yeah, well, I mean the visual is very jarring too because I mean it's like once that image came out and you saw what she like looks like in that role, it's just like man, it just like looks so fake. You know, she's got like the wig on and everything. It's just I don't know, man. I don't know.
Well, I'll tell you what.
Mm-hmm.
I really do not care about the whitewashing in this movie. I'm done.
Oh, okay.
Well,
I thought you were maybe would extrapolate. So give me something to rebut here.
I've already kind of mentioned it that I'm kind of the audience member who they're trying to get into the theaters in the first place, and I feel like if it does make the movie better, then let's cast her. And the reason why I say that is because of the fact that because of this fact that they're actually making a Ghost in the Shell movie at all.
Yeah.
Like, let's let that sink in for just a second.
Right. I mean, really.
Let it sink in.
Okay.
Okay.
There we go. It's sunk in. I think a lot of it, too, is with Scarlett Johansson in particular, she's the reason why this movie was pulled out of development hell. Because from what I understand about Ghost in the Shell, the rights were already like sold to like DreamWorks or whoever is producing this years ago, like maybe as far back as like 2010 2012 something like that. So it's been in development hell for a while, and I think it's like once Scarlett Johansson jumped on board the project and said, hey, I want to play this part, let's do it, that's when it got kind of kick-started and jump-started, what have you. And I mean, really, I guess if you think about it, she's probably the only reason why this movie is getting made at all.
It's true.
But it's just
okay, like I will say, like, whitewashing in movies, especially for Asian movies, it is becoming a disturbing trend in Hollywood.
Yeah.
But it's gotten to a point where I don't really care anymore. And personally, I'm not entirely convinced that casting the correct ethnicity in movies like this will automatically make it better.
Right.
One example I'll give you is The Last Airbender.
Mm-hmm.
So they casted white people as the two main characters, and they cast an Asian person as a villain.
Yep.
I don't think that casting the right ethnicities there would have made the movie any better, because you really have to think of it as, where is this movie even coming from? Like, who's directing it? How well is it being made? The amount of political correctness in the movie and in the casting is not necessarily going to save it.
Right, but I will say this: it might not have been that much. It might not have been a better movie with the correct casting, but it certainly wouldn't have made it any worse, And it's like already the outcry was there before the movie even came out, and it gives it already basically the same way that we feel about movies that haven't come out yet, like Ghostbusters or Jumanji or anything getting remade, and we look at them with like scorn and derision before they come out.
Right.
It's the same thing. You're already going into The Last Airbender. You're already going into Ghost in the Shell. Like people like me, at least, not like you, where you don't really, you don't really care about the casting in particular. But people like me who would look at that movie and already be like, you know what, this is going to be stupid because of this like non-correct casting choices, And it's like, it wouldn't make them any better, but I certainly don't think that it would be any worse, As long as you have a capable cast and a capable like director too, and a capable people around them, you can make it work, Yeah. It's not just the one leading person that that makes it a good or bad movie. In fact, Scarlett Johansson might kill it in this role, but if it's not directed well, if it's not edited well, it's still going to be a shitty movie. Yeah. So it's like you have to have the right crew around it too. And I haven't really even looked at who the director is or who who's going to be like working on this project. You know what? I honestly don't care, because for me, I'm more mad about like the whitewashing, And for me, really just the rebuttal I have to that, it's mostly personal, It's 2016. But sometimes I feel like a lot of our mainstream culture, it feels like it's regressing to this 1816 mentality or some shit. We're so afraid to put minorities in the spotlight. for fear that like, oh well, like, you know, audiences won't, you know, they won't like they won't connect with the characters on screen because it's like, oh, it's a woman, or oh, it's a minority, it's a black guy or an Asian guy, you know.
Yeah.
And it's like, you know, as somebody who's like, I'm a mixed race, I'm half Chinese and half white, and I embrace both cultures. But more often than not, I'm more like aligned and in tune with my Chinese side because, you know, it makes me stand out from the everyday mundanity of being.
You want to be different.
It makes me stand out from the mundanity of being fucking white, you know? And
okay, yeah.
Because all I see on TV and in movies is fucking white people, you know, vanilla ass white people. And I apologize, right, for everybody in there, but, you know, it's hard to understand if you're not like. I feel like it's hard to understand if you're not like a minority, you know? And there's like, where are the movies that depict people like me? Yeah, so I mean, that's the question I have to ask. Where is like my representation on screen? And I think you could look at a movie like this movie that was recently released called Aloha, starring, well, you know, it's got Bradley Cooper, Rachel McAdams, Bill Murray, Emma Stone. Emma Stone was cast as a half Hawaiian, half Chinese person in this movie.
Or was there any bit of white in her character?
I have no idea.
She was at least supposed to be half Chinese. That's as much as I know.
Yeah, she's supposed to be half Chinese, and I'm looking at Emma Stone, like, no offense to Emma Stone, but she is like the whitest white girl.
She's really, really pasty.
Yeah, she's one of the whitest white girls you could put in that role, and you have the audacity to be like, oh, she's like half Chinese.
She's half, you know?
You gotta be
right?
shitting me, you know? It's like, I'm like half Chinese, and I'm like sitting there like, you know, you can't fucking cast like an actual person in that role.
No, they can't.
Yeah. And that's the thing, is like, I don't like where this road is going of like this continual like whitewashing of mainstream culture, because, you know, I'm, you know, like when I think about like when I have kids, you know, they're going to be mixed. They're going to be even more mixed than I am.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't want them growing up without strong like ethnic protagonists to look up to, or people at least of that like look like them on screen, you know? I don't like this. And the thing is, looking at the other way, I don't like this quote unquote idea. I don't think the idea of like quote unquote abolishing ethnicity or race altogether is the right way to go about it. You know, people who are all like, well, race shouldn't matter, man, because that idea usually ends up in everything being whitewashed anyway. That's the whole idea. Is it's like
because the people,
yeah.
If you get to a point where it doesn't matter, the people in control are just going to be putting whatever they want.
Exactly.
And the easiest one, the ones that make money, since we're no longer talking about race, we're talking about money, right?
Yeah.
We'll just put white people because that's what people pay to see.
Exactly. So that's what happens when you suppose the only people that are talking about abolishing race and abolishing ethnicity are white people. That's the thing, you know? And I mean, I apologize for making this like super racial or super ethnic, but you know, I think that different cultures, they need to be celebrated in a way that doesn't really set them apart from the mainstream. You know, I think that it needs like different cultures need to be celebrated and need to be represented, not necessarily as like something that's, like I said, away from the mainstream, but as like part of it, you know? And it's a simple matter of like casting people in like these roles where it's like, if you're making a movie about Japanese people, cast a Japanese actor or a Japanese actress. There are certainly enough of them, you know, to put in that role. Same thing for like anybody who's like Chinese or Indian, Mexican even, or like, you know, and that's the thing, is it's like you get, and that's the thing. It's really important to me personally. Race is a very important thing to me personally, as somebody who grew up in a very diverse city like San Francisco, you know, and my whole life I've been struggling with like identity issues about like, what am I? Who am I? And now that I'm an adult and I've kind of solidified a little bit more of like who I am. I know who I am and I know where I come from. And that's the problem, is I'm not seeing that representation on screen enough, at least in mainstream Hollywood movies, you know, and that's where it needs to be.
Wow.
Yeah. Sorry, man. I had to say it all. So
dropping a bomb on me.
Well, you know, it's okay. You dropped a bomb in the bathroom earlier before we started, but anyway.
Anyway, all I'm saying about, in my opinion, I think that Hollywood is just kind of going through a phase.
Mm-hmm.
Like it may have lasted 30, 40, 50 years, but I think they're going through a little bit of a different phase right now, in which they are experimenting with these like big budget foreign movies, like especially with anime now. They're kind of bringing a lot of anime movies in and they're testing them out. And naturally, since they are untested, they want them to succeed in any way possible. It's not like they're bringing them on and just kind of throwing like a couple $1 million and pushing them to the side. No, this is something that's going to be in the forefront. They're going to be marketing this really, really hard, and they want it to succeed. And the only way that they can guarantee that that is going to happen is if they get a household name like Scarlett Johansson to be in it.
Right.
They have a much greater chance to succeed with that. And I think it will take a while, but we will definitely see more movies based on animes with Asians starring in them.
Yeah.
Like they just need to prove to the studios that these can be profitable, and the only way for them to do that is to start off this way.
Well,
and so in other words, if you want to see more Asians in anime movies in Hollywood, go see Ghost in the Shell.
Well, at least you have a very positive outlook on it. Like a lot more positive than me, obviously.
I'm the master of finding silver linings in it and everything. So I think my Wretched, it's
your verdict.
My verdict.
Yes,
your Wretched. My verdict. It will be.
For Ghost in the Shell in particular.
Yeah, Ghost in the Shell. I will say it will be reasonable. It will be a reasonable reboot. For the reasons that I just mentioned.
Okay. So you've already discussed those reasons. My verdict, it's going to be mostly Wretched, I'll say somewhat to mostly Wretched.
Okay, like 40% Wretched.
Yeah, it's not all the way there, but it's going to be mostly Wretched because for me, you know what? I don't plan on watching this. Like not in theaters at least. I will not pay money for this.
Okay.
Because for me, I can't in good conscience support a movie that's built on that continued whitewashing of Asians because I care about it. It's a personal choice. When it comes to this topic, I'm like pretty adamant about it. And I mean, you know what? It might turn out to be a decent movie that is somewhat successful, and that's fine. That's good on them it would be good on them for making a decent movie adaptation of it,
Yeah.
But if it turns out to be a dud and they don't make any more of those kind of like big budget anime
then that means you're
adaptations,
right.
You know what? I'm perfectly fine with that. I am
Okay.
super fine with that. That's all good with me, man. So, yeah, that'll be my verdict for Ghost in the Shell.
So there you go. First two Wretched reboots, they're mostly Wretched.
Yeah, mostly Wretched. We picked some heavy wretchedness to start with, I mean, honestly, because it's called Wretched Reboots, we might not be talking about...
What are you going to expect?
Yeah, we might not be talking about good ones, but hey, some might come along that might impress us someday. We'll see.
All right. So moving on, we're almost out of time, so let's...
Bring it to our final round.
Where
we talk about like what we're going to be doing or what we have been doing lately. Just a couple of little quick blurbs on what's going on in our lives.
Yeah.
Joey, you want to start us off?
Yeah, I've been watching a lot of well, actually not a lot, but trying to continue Better Call Saul.
Oh yeah, that's the sequel to.
Or it's like the spin-off of Breaking Bad.
Breaking Bad. That was
Bob Odenkirk's character, and it's super good.
Super good.
It's really, really good. It kind of requires you to watch a lot of Breaking Bad to get to know who these characters are to begin with, since it is kind of an origin story. But it's really, really good. I'm only on the 3rd episode, but I just need to watch more.
Nice.
And one of the things that I feel that kind of ruined the show for me is when I found out that one of the characters in it, Michael McKean.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know who he is?
Not really.
He was actually, I didn't know this before, but he was the neighbor in the Brady Bunch movie, Mr. Dittmeyer.
Oh.
Do you remember the Brady Bunch movie?
It's been such a long time since I saw that. But
yeah, I did not know that. And that character has always been so hilarious to me. And in Better Call Saul, he plays like this serious lawyer type. And
yeah.
I didn't know that throughout the first season. And then I found out. And now I'm watching the second season. I'm like,
right. Now you can't unsee it.
I can't do this anymore. Because I just see him as like this. Oh man.
Nice.
But yeah, the Brady Bunch movie. That's what I've been doing. Wait.
Brady Bunch movie. All right. That too.
By the way, which is a good movie. We'll talk about that in a future episode.
All right.
Will?
I've also been watching a new TV series recently along with Joss. We've been watching a lot of Jessica Jones lately.
On Netflix.
On Netflix. It is a very good, very dark and cerebral Marvel TV show. I mean, kind of along the lines of Daredevil. It's a little less actiony, but it's a lot darker. It's got that darker tone to it.
Is she a superhero?
She is. She's got like the super strength and everything. And Luke Cage is also in the film. They're both like kind of like super strong, like people who but she's more of like a private detective, you know. She's more of like an anti-hero in the movie. It takes a lot of cues from like film noir and detective fiction and stuff like that. But it's super good, you know. And it's like I think Joss has been really enjoying it lately too, you know. It's a really cool show, and I'm glad we've been watching it lately. And I've also been working. I've also gotten kind of back to work on my novel that I had been writing.
For the last 15, I don't even know how many years you've been working on that.
I'll talk about it more another time, but like I've had that going since like college, and you know I was away in Taiwan for a while working on it, and I kind of stopped when I came back, and I recently made a lot of changes to it, but I've come up with some ideas lately. Then I'm really excited to kind of be back into writing and everything and working on that.
I can't wait for the film adaptation where you're played by a white man.
Oh yeah, well. That'll come eventually.
That will happen. I will be directing it. I'm gonna be like, Will, I'm going with that guy.
Yeah, you're gonna offer me a lot of money for them rights, right?
No,
it's like $20.
I'll buy the book and just make it off of that. We are out of time here on this episode of RetroActive. Hope you enjoyed our first kind of little segment for Wretched Reboots. We'll have plenty more. Maybe we'll do something like one a month.
Yeah, you know, it'll be pretty regular. There's a lot. We came up with a list, and there's a lot of Wretched reboots and remakes and sequels to talk about, and we will definitely talk about them.
Your favorite franchise getting a reboot will be on the show soon.
Probably. Yeah, so once again, thanks for listening, and that was Joey. I'm Will. And if you like what you heard, you want to support the show, feel free to like, comment, subscribe, either on iTunes, Liberated Syndication, or Libsyn, or YouTube as well. And you can check us out on social media. We have an Instagram at retro.active. We have a Twitter account at _retroactive, as one word, and a Facebook as RetroActive Podcast, all one word.
We got a lot of different retroactives here.
Yeah, it was kind of hard to get everything in the same format, which obviously we didn't do. But hey, if you want to check us out on social media, we update those somewhat regularly. So go check us out on all of those sites, and we will catch you next week here on RetroActive.